Catholic films that inspire people to something greater, film at its highest level could give people that in their heart, in their mind. They can close their eyes, think about that, whether that is in a Catholic story or a non-Catholic story. But I think that is like the highest form of filmmaking for me.
Hi, my name is Michael Coy. This is the Catholic Film Club, and today we're going to be interviewing Rob Kaczmark, the president and CEO of Spirit Juice Studios. Now, if you don't know Spirit Juice Studios, you've definitely seen their work. They're a professional production house based in Chicago, and in addition to the amazing advertising work they also do a lot of amazing work for Catholic organizations like the Knights of Columbus and Ward on Fire. And now Rob has co-directed a feature-length documentary called Heart of a Servant, the Father Flanagan Story, and it tells the true story, the amazing true story of Father Flanagan and the founding of Boys Town. This interview is a part of our continuing series on Catholic and Christian filmmaking, and it's important to us because our team at Benedictine not only creates this podcast and marketing materials for Benedictine, but also has thrown its hat into the documentary ring as well, with our documentary, The Pint and the Cross, How to Drink Like a Saint, written and hosted by Michael Foley, who is the author of the series of books called Drinking with the Saints. We're really excited about that one. It's providing a whole new perspective on how to reconcile love for God and an enjoyment of alcohol. So we'll link to that below. You can find it at pintandcross.com. And now I'll move to our interview with Rob Kaczmark of Spirit Juice Studios. This was our first interview, me and Patrick, on Zoom, and so you're going to see a lot of synchronized nodding. So look out for that. I believe that there's at least 50 synchronized nods in this video. Actually, Patrick worked behind the scenes on Heart of a Servant as well, so he has some insight from the production angle on this film. Well, here's the trailer for Heart of a Servant, and without further ado, Rob Kaczmark.
My boys and I want to bring you a special message of peace.
Father Flanagan is an American success story. Came on Ellis Island with nothing in his pockets. He was somebody that saw the common humanity that we all share as brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ.
He was raising these boys not to be just good, but to be strong.
It wasn't just that those who disagreed with Father Flanagan were willing to sort of sit in the background. They tried to get in his way.
So he moved to the middle of a cornfield and started his own town.
When you examine why he did what he did and the conflicts that he took on, you're going to see the face of Jesus Christ in his work.
Thanks, Rob, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be talking with Patrick again, too. We go way back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so good to see you again, Rob.
Yeah, Patrick, you worked on this movie a little bit behind the scenes.
I did, yeah. I was a gear technician and kind of helped with the gear logistics for all the Flanagan stuff. I was telling Michael earlier, Rob, it was kind of really cool seeing the documentary come to fruition, because when I was working there, I don't think I really understood like how awesome and how large scale of a production this was. So it was really remarkable just seeing all the names of people we'd work with, and then seeing it all kind of come together with this amazing documentary is just like really something that you should, and the whole team at Spirit Juice should be proud of.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Very proud of it. And it's something I say to all the time, where it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this documentary is proof of that. Like, there's not one person that made it or break it. There were so many people on so many different parts, whether it's prepping the equipment to go out to the field, resetting it, writing the script, doing the interviews, doing a lot of logistics, or just even like some of the big picture stuff that had to get done behind the scenes. So many different people. They say every film that gets done is like a mini miracle, and I think this is no exception to that.
So true.
Well, I mean, talking about a miracle, I mean, Father Flanagan's life really seems like a miracle in itself. Can you talk about his life and what drew you to this project?
You know, Father Flanagan is an incredible human, an incredible priest who just did so much remarkable work at the time. And I think, so he was an Irish immigrant. He came here at a young age and then joined the seminary and was positioned in Omaha, Nebraska. And this was really at the time of the Great Depression, so saw a lot of homeless men on the street, and tried to help them. But he found that a lot of them still wanted an idle life, where they didn't necessarily want to work to get things better. And so he thought, might be good to kind of get these at a younger age when he could still, in his words, form them to good American citizens. And that's what led him to start, this work that eventually led to Boys Town, which really was for unhoused, like homeless boys on the street who had nowhere to go, or had no one to take care of them. And so he gave them not just an institution, but really a home for these young men to grow, to thrive, and then to really go on and do good work out there. And so he tried to come at it from three different ways. First, the physical, which is like make sure they have food, shelter, clothing, all that stuff, that like basic human needs. And then it was, they weren't just like sitting around, like they had chores. It was a farm. They had things to do. And so it was forming them as good men, young men that know how to operate. And the third thing was a little bit on the more softer side. He didn't force faith on the kids, but he gave them the opportunity for that. And he really called all of them to be a saint. And so, those three things can be pretty powerful when you mix them together, especially with young men. And, it's proof of it in seeing the work that he did throughout Boys Town and throughout the world.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was watching it, I could not help but think of kind of a mantra at Benedictine College. It's kind of perfect for our audience at Benedictine because it's really about, he built a community of faith and scholarship, and that's what Benedictine is about. Now, his community, the scholarship was really almost the scholarship of life, actually creating and living in a city. I had heard of Boys Town, but I didn't realize that it was a literal town. It was as close to a literal town as you could create. I just thought
it was practically a city. I mean, it was like in the documentary, they say that they eventually got a post office, which is showing how solidified the town itself was. It's remarkable.
I mean, still to this day, they have their own police department, fire department. Like it's a town. It's a small town, but it's a town.
Yeah. One of the things that I kind of wanted to ask you about was when I was watching the documentary, I think a long time ago I had seen Boys Town as a movie, and I had heard about Father Flanagan. I mean, I had worked on the project itself, but I still didn't really understand how large scale and larger than life this man was. And the thing that stuck out to me was his battles against the Ku Klux Klan, which I had no idea about. That was surprising to me, but along the way for you and the team researching Father Flanagan, was there anything that came out surprising or unexpected, or something that you just didn't really know about Father Flanagan along the way?
Yeah, when you dive into someone's life, sometimes you just sort of, the big headlines, and it's like, oh, they did X, Y, or Z. But all of those came with a lot of opposition, as you mentioned. And one of the things that was interesting to me was not necessarily that it was broadcasted out loud, but as we did more research and finding out, and we illustrated a little bit in the film where he talked about there was a young man, under 18 that was convicted of murder, and he went to the judge to sort of plead for that. He didn't do that just one time. He did that like over 100 times. Anytime those cases came up, he did that. And that was back in the day when we didn't have, airplanes were not as, you couldn't just jump on a Southwest flight really quickly. You're taking a bus or a train, or, it takes a while. But he thought it was so important to do that because, in his eyes, if these kids had parents, and these are for kids that didn't have parents, because if they had a parent, I'm sure the parent would come forward and say, listen, my child, they're better than this. I want to take care of them and stuff. But these kids didn't have that. And they, did, at the time, things that weren't good. But Father Flanagan thought there was no bad child, only bad circumstances. So he pleaded for them, and oftentimes was able to take them back to Boys Town and rehabilitate them, which I thought was really remarkable because that's like, it's a huge time investment. And I think nowadays we're always like, how can we maximize our time and, do less and delegate and all that stuff, which is good in theory. But when you lose a human connection and you lose the reason why you're doing it. And so for me, it was always like, he always knew why he was doing it and never stopped doing some of those things that really would make an impact in those young people's lives.
Yeah, it's I think what really I think he's just a testament to the fact that anyone can be a saint. And that's even a message in your film. That's actually a message that he imparted to a young boy. There's a story in the film where someone recounts that moment, and you look at it and you think, how could anybody do all the things that he did? Because you go way beyond Boys Town in this and uncover things that I had never heard about. My wife actually grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and she didn't know about half of this stuff about the work that he did for Japanese youths during the internment camps. And I don't know, it's just a beautiful message. It's like, how could you do it? Well, if you love God, then I guess that's your answer.
Yeah, and I think it could be both inspiring and intimidating when you watch these saint stories, because it's like inspiring in the sense of, well, this is a potentially American saint, someone who spent most of their time on American soil. So there's like, okay, a lot of times we think about saints, Saint Francis, Saint Joseph, in different lands and stuff that are not here, but this is an American saint potentially, and so it's inspiring to think of that. But then also intimidating, because you're like, wow, I look at my life, I'm like, well, I didn't do nearly a fraction of what Father Flanagan did. But I think that's where we have to just kind of broaden our view of what a saint is. Because some saints do a ton of stuff and are sort of world travelers. But there's also the quiet saints. I mean, Saint Joseph, and not to go back to that, but like, he stayed in a very small area and took care of one person really well. And so I think that's the most important thing. Who is God putting in front of your life, or putting in your life to take care of? Because that's what brings us sainthood, and that's what brings us closer to God, is taking care of the people in front of you. And if God wants you to take care of thousands of people like Father Flanagan, he'll put them in front of you. But for now, it's most likely your spouse, your kids, your mom and dad, your siblings, and maybe some close friends. Those are the people that you need to be Christ-like to. And it's often harder because, it might be easier to like give your stuff to the world, then you kind of come back and, you can have, but like giving yourself in your own home, especially after a long day of work, is challenging. But that's what we're called to.
You're speaking to me, Rob. My daughter just turned 2, so we're dealing with that whole transition, and but that's the call. Yeah, it's a good point. Like you answer the call that you've been given. Hey, speaking of intimidating, though, I wanted to talk about the production of this film, because what I was really impressed with, just as a video producer over here in Atchison, is the enormous amount of archival footage that you have brought together, the access to Father Flanagan in Boys Town, but also archival footage from the period, and what I believe were recreations of archival moments that were really quite seamless. Could you talk about like diving into that research and that like wealth of footage and access and that story?
So the archival process, that's the unsung heroes of this film is all of that, because there was so much, as you mentioned, that went into that. And there was a combination of stuff that we were able to get from Boys Town, that they had access stuff, still to get permissions and all like the paperwork for that, a lot of paperwork. And then there's stuff that, we're talking about, say, World War II, and we're showing scenes from World War II. So trying to source that footage, license that footage, make sure it had all the proper licensing and stuff for that. And then we did a little bit of reenactments too, things that we made to look like it was older. So whether, we shot it overseas, or we shot some reenactments actually in Boys Town and had an actor that looked like Father Flanagan, we tried to fill in those gaps to give you a full picture of who he was, despite us either not having footage, like either footage didn't exist or we just couldn't get access to some of it. We wanted to also include some of the Boys Town film. So, but that we couldn't get. So, however, we were able to kind of work around that, getting some Hollywood footage from the premiere, and then Spencer Tracy when he won the Oscar. That was fun to kind of find that, because we actually didn't know that clip. I didn't know personally that clip existed, and so the archival process is a little bit of like Indiana Jones archaeologist. You're digging. You don't know what you're going to find. Sometimes you unearth some things that are just really amazing, and then sometimes you got to keep digging and digging and digging, and you don't find what you're looking for, or you can't get the permission for it. So it was quite fun. but it is quite an undertaking to to manage all of that stuff. It is certainly easier just to shoot everything from scratch, but the archival, I think, gives it a depth. It's my pastor actually was talking about the film. He's like, it's a great snapshot of sort of Americana, in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Which I didn't really like make that connection, but it really does when you show some of the archival stuff, and it kind of brings you back in time a little bit. So it was fun. It was a fun part to incorporate into the film.
Yeah, it all pays off. I mean, you really feel like you are have been thrown into the period, and it really helps in putting you in that time and place and understanding the impact and the gravity of the choices and actions that Father Flanagan was making. No, it really serves to understand the man himself and the people that he was helping. Yeah.
I feel like for myself, one of the reasons why I was always hesitant to documentary filmmaking is because it's tough to kind of put yourself in those shoes in that time period and ask yourself, like, well, it happened so long ago. Why should I care about something like this? And setting the stage aesthetically does a very good job at putting you in that time period, which kind of building off what Michael said. This film does a tremendous job of putting you about like 80 to 100 years ago and making it feel like, wow, this is something very tangible and real. And that's a feat in of itself. But a question that I wanted to bring up was kind of like what Michael said. This film has been a project that's been ongoing for several years now. As far as I remember, I mean, anywhere between four plus years. But how in that time has working on this film and being a part of this film affected you spiritually or personally, or anything within your own life that along the way and journey of making this movie you kind of felt impacted by Father Flanagan?
Something that I didn't make the connection to until, like, a lot of times you're working on something and you're just sort of you're in it, and you don't realize what's happening until you take a step back. So I didn't realize. If you asked me this question maybe like 6 months ago, I'd be like, I don't know, I'm not sure.
Sure.
But once it got like done, and I was able to kind of take a step back and just realize a couple different things. I would say, first off, something that we started in the process of this, because you're right, it has been 4+ years that we've been working on it. We started a kids program called Juicebox. It's a Catholic YouTube channel for kids. And I, realizing the connection between that and Father Flanagan is very similar in the sense of, Father Flanagan cared for kids that were not being cared for on the street. And I think right now in the digital world, there's a lot of kids that are on platforms like YouTube and stuff that don't have the faith to be taught to them. And so, he's sort of our patron saint of that platform. And so realizing just sort of like the care for children is so important. It's been like ingrained. And, when we started this project, I got two boys. My firstborn was just born. And so I've kind of like, they've grown up with this, and just realizing, like, looking at them through the lens of Father Flanagan of there's no bad boy, because if you have kids, that could be a challenging, whether you have boys or girls, you need to be reminded of that, because you have those days where you're like, this is extremely hard. And, but you realize that, like, your reaction is the only thing you could control in those situations. And it's not, the kids are just growing up. And so I think, I don't know, there was just a lot of like sort of like spirituality I was able to kind of pull from Father Flanagan in my own fatherhood and how I'm, trying to raise these boys right now. And really what a privilege it is too. Like I got to imagine Father Flanagan look back at his life and realize what an amazing privilege it was to raise all these young men. And, for most parents, you probably only have a couple to raise, not thousands like Father Flanagan. But it's honestly the best time. It's the best time of my life is raising my kids. And I think doing it well and doing it and following a model like Father Flanagan's been really cool. So I would say that.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
It changes your life completely. Actually, we'll have to check out Juicebox, because we're just we have to go back in time for most of our kids' content. So we have to
feeling.
Search back in the nostalgia sphere. So we'll have to check out Juicebox in that case. But what about Spirit Juice Studios? I'm really interested in what influenced you to create this company and what the mission is of it.
So, I'm cradle Catholic, and growing up, I got involved in youth ministry, around 12, 13 years old. And I kept always, so this goes back to the 90s. So the world looked a little different then. But regardless, I would always ask the question of like, why doesn't things look better? Like, why is it, we'd get like things printed out or just different videos they might put on. And at that time, it was probably VHS, maybe for DVD if we were lucky. And I'd always keep asking the question, why doesn't church stuff look better? Why doesn't church stuff look better? And the only answer I really got was my youth minister was like, well, if you think you can make something better, then do it yourself. And, I was a young kid, so I couldn't really make stuff better myself. I didn't know how to, nor was the technology as readily available as it is now. But I still dabbled, and I played around with little stuff. And so, as I grew my faith and I got more involved in the church and did more things, I was able to, do more of that, just create more. And I really, found a passion in that. I found a lot of life in that. And so it goes back to Spirit Juice. When it first started, was actually a radio show on Relevant Radio for like 2.5 years. And I thought that's where God was calling me to do, is to do radio, Catholic radio. And it was very exciting, but it came to a halt pretty quickly, which is probably a story for another day. And so I didn't know really where God was leading me. They say like when God closes a door, he opens a window. I will say this. Sometimes that window takes a little bit longer to open. Sometimes people think that like the door shuts and the window opens at the same time, like on a spring. Sometimes it's days, weeks, months. In my case, it was almost a year. But the window that opened was this. Someone who saw some of the work that I was doing throughout just like the ministry days and a little bit of the radio, thought I was impressive enough, and they wanted to potentially bring me on to create some content for their Catholic organization. And I was honored, but I thought for a second, I was like, I think there's more of a need than just them. Just growing up and being around the church for such a long time, at that point I was probably, heavily involved in church stuff for almost 10 years. And I was like, I want to help them, but I also want to serve the church on a greater scale. And so I was like, would you guys hire me as a contractor? Because I want to start Spirit Juice Studios as like a Catholic production company. And they said, sure, no problem. For them, as any organization, a contractor is less liability than an employee. And picture me as a 21-year-old. I looked even crazier than I do now. So I'm sure that gave them some consolation. So anyways, they were our first client. They gave me the first at bat, and I just I quit my full-time job and just went 100% into it. And I was like, I'm dedicating everything I have right now. And at the time I was single, just went full force, and God willing, I'm still here 17 years later, and just feel very blessed to still continue to do the work that we're doing.
That's incredible.
That's
and you've been
amazing.
raising the bar,
Absolutely.
in the Catholic world, especially just when it comes to film production. We're always trying to be like, what would Spirit Juice do when we put something
Very
together?
kind.
We've
you
taken
for
a look
saying
at
that.
so many of the videos and being like,
Yeah.
this is what we're going to kind of copy here. And we just always look at
Yeah.
so many different little things that Spirit Juice has worked on, and just putting dabbling the faith and the art hand in hand is something that you guys always do a great job about.
Yeah.
Kind of led me into another one of my questions was, you've basically made a career with and through your Catholic faith, and a really amazing business has come up out of your Catholic faith and the people that work at Spirit Juice. Mm-hmm. And the stories that you guys tell are all faith-oriented and faith-based. And I was kind of wondering how you view filmmaking and visual storytelling through that, and what role faith plays into those stories that you guys tell.
That's a really good question. It's a really good question.
Not to throw a super deep existential question at you, but
yeah, well, I think it's funny because I could answer this in a couple of different ways. On one way, I could in the very faith way, but at the same time, like, myself, I don't just watch Catholic films. Like if I want to turn my brain off, I'm going to put Transformers on, or maybe an OG Marvel movie, not the newer ones. So I think filmmaking is an amazing platform to create a lot of stuff. I think there's a need to create just pure entertainment, because I think, just for myself, like my day's pretty darn stressful. And so being able to just turn my brain off and watch something that's just fun, or just like we were watching Ratatouille with my kids last night. They just, love the idea of a rat cooking and all this stuff. And so like that has its place. That's really good. However, I think as Bishop Barron kind of calls, like he says, Mass is the highest form of play. And so I think to create Catholic films that inspire people to something greater is sort of, I don't want to say the best you can do with film, but I think the entertainment thing is great. I think it's needed, but whether it's a Catholic film or just a film that inspires people to do greater things, I think that's so important. There's a couple just films I reflect on often that aren't even Catholic, but they have just such heroic themes in there that give me inspiration. Just thinking about it, I could just, and we probably have those films. You could close your eyes and you could picture this scene in this film where the protagonist, the hero in it, did something remarkable that changed the outcome of that film in the world, probably of in that instance. And you were like, you get chills when you watch it, and you think about those moments, and you're like, yes. So I think like film at its highest level could give people that in their heart, in their mind. They can close their eyes, think about that, whether that is in a Catholic story or a non-Catholic story. But I think that is like the highest form of filmmaking for me.
Well, Rob, as we wrap this conversation up, are there any more thoughts about Father Flanagan and things that you would like to impart about this story to our audience?
I'd impart this, and this is one of the last quotes you hear from Father Flanagan in the film, and he says, the work will continue, not because it's my work, but it's because it's from God, and I'm paraphrasing it, but I think God's work of continuing to renew the earth will always be happening. And I think for us, we can look at the world and see all the negative and be pretty depressed, if you will, on just like all the bad stuff happening. But what we fail to recognize in those moments is how God's working all across the world in every one of us. And so just like Father Flanagan heard that call and served the people in front of him, I think we're called to do the same thing. And if we shine our light through our lens on other people, I think we're going to find more hope out there. And I think Father Flanagan looked at the world, not, it was the Great Depression. So like clearly there was a lot of negative stuff, but he looked at it through an optimistic lens and how he can help change that. So when suffering's presented to you, it's not, we could sit around asking why, but I think the more important question is, how can I help?
It's a great message to
That's
end
awesome.
on. And it's a great film, and it really imparts that message. And I just wanted to thank you, Rob, for sharing his story with the world, and thank you for coming on the show. And just God bless.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. We appreciate everything that you do at Spirit Juice, and we thank you also for just making this beautiful documentary.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you guys having me. Pat, it's always good to see you. He used to sit back in this chair way back when he was here. So
I think my first day as an intern, I probably sat there to do our intern video.
Yeah.
Very full circle moment.
Maybe we'll link that below.
Oh gosh.
Cool. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks again to Rob Kaczmark for joining us for that interview. Again, you can see Heart of a Servant, the Father Flanagan Story, on Amazon Prime. And if you want to watch The Pint and the Cross, you can watch that at pintandcross.com. My name is Michael Coy. This is the Catholic Film Club, brought to you by the Center for Catholic Media at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. God bless.